I'm Madison, 29 years old. The doctor's words hit me like a physical blow. Your uterine condition makes pregnancy impossible. I sat there in that sterile white office, staring at the ultrasound images that might as well have been death certificates for every dream I'd ever had about motherhood. My husband Jake squeezed my hand, but his touch felt distant. The room spun slightly as Dr. Patterson continued explaining medical terms I couldn't process. Scarring, complications, irreversible. Words that carved out pieces of my soul with surgical precision. There are options, she was saying, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Surrogacy, adoption. I nodded mechanically, but inside, everything was crumbling. Since I was 12 years old, I'd planned my future around being a mother. Baby names written in diary margins. Career choices made specifically to accommodate future pregnancies. My entire identity built around a biological function that would never happen. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like your dreams were ripped away in an instant. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. The drive home was silent except for the hum of tires against pavement. Jake kept glancing at me like I might shatter if he spoke too loudly. Maybe he was right. I felt fragile enough to dissolve completely. At home, I locked myself in our bedroom and stared at the hope chest I'd been filling since college. Tiny onesies. A hand-knitted blanket my grandmother made. A silver rattle that had been mine as a baby. All of it suddenly useless. Mocking me. That night, I didn't sleep. I researched every medical journal, every treatment option, every miracle story I could find online. But the verdict was unanimous. My body had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. Days blurred together. I called in sick to work more often than I showed up. Jake tried to be supportive, but I could see the helplessness in his eyes. How do you comfort someone whose deepest wish will never come true? My twin sister Emma became my lifeline. She brought me groceries, sat with me during the worst crying spells, and held me when I couldn't form words to describe the emptiness inside. This isn't the end, she kept saying. There are other ways. But I wasn't ready to hear about other ways. I was too busy grieving the way I'd always imagined it would happen. 3 months of therapy later, Dr. Roberts finally broke through my wall of self-pity. Madison, refusing to explore options isn't protecting you from more heartbreak. It's guaranteeing your current pain will be permanent. Her words stung because they were true. I'd been wallowing, treating this diagnosis like a death sentence instead of a detour. Slowly, reluctantly, I began researching surrogacy. The process seemed overwhelming. Background checks, psychological evaluations, legal contracts thick enough to choke on. It's a lot, Jake agreed when we discussed it that evening. But if it means we can have our biological child, isn't it worth trying? His enthusiasm surprised me. For months, he'd been walking on eggshells, afraid to push too hard in any direction. But the possibility of biological parenthood had reawakened something in him. Maybe it was reawakening something in me, too. We started interviewing potential surrogates. The agency sent us profiles like we were online dating, but for wombs instead of hearts. Sarah from Portland, yoga instructor, previous successful pregnancy, glowing references. Jennifer from Seattle, teacher, married with 2 children, motivated by desire to help others. None of them felt right. These were strangers who would carry our most precious hope. How could we trust someone we barely knew with everything that mattered? I've been thinking, Emma said during one of our coffee dates. We were sitting in the same cafe where I'd first told her about the diagnosis, where I'd sobbed into my latte about feeling broken and useless. What if you didn't have to trust a stranger? I looked up from my cup, confused. What do you mean? She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting mine with that intensity she'd had since childhood, whenever she was about to announce some grand plan. What if I carried your baby? The words hung between us like a bridge I was afraid to cross. Emma, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. She leaned forward, her voice gaining strength. Madison, no one could love that baby more than I do before it's even conceived. No one would take better care of it. And no one understands what this means to you better than I do. My throat closed up. The generosity of her offer was overwhelming. It's too much to ask. You're not asking. I'm offering. She reached across the table and covered my hands with hers. We're identical twins. Genetically, we're almost the same person. Who better to carry your child than someone who shares your DNA? That night, Jake and I talked until sunrise about Emma's offer. The legal implications, the emotional complications, the sheer magnitude of what she was proposing to do for us. She's your sister, Jake said finally. If we can't trust her, who can we trust? The fertility clinic appointment felt like a job interview for the most important position in the world. Emma sat beside me, holding my hand as Dr. Patterson explained the process. Hormonal treatments for Emma, egg retrieval for me, careful timing, legal documentation. The success rates are encouraging, Dr. Patterson said, reviewing Emma's medical history. She's young, healthy, no prior complications. From a medical standpoint, this arrangement has excellent potential. Legal documentation proved more complex than any of us anticipated. The contracts were dense with terminology about parental rights, financial responsibilities, medical decision-making authority. Page after page of scenarios none of us wanted to imagine but had to address. This is crucial, our lawyer emphasized, sliding the final documents across his mahogany desk. These contracts establish beyond any doubt that Madison and Jake are the legal parents. Emma is serving as a gestational carrier only. She has no parental rights or responsibilities once the child is born. Emma signed without hesitation, her signature bold and confident. I want this to be crystal clear. This is Madison's baby. I'm just providing a safe place for it to grow. The hormonal preparation took 2 months. Emma endured daily injections with stoic determination, updating me on every side effect, every doctor's visit, every milestone in the process. Her dedication was humbling. I've never seen anyone more committed to someone else's happiness, Jake observed one evening as we reviewed Emma's latest medical reports. Your sister is incredible. I agreed wholeheartedly. Emma was sacrificing her body, her time, her comfort for our dream. How could I ever repay such selflessness? The day of the transfer, we all held hands in the medical facility's waiting room. Emma squeezed my fingers as they called her name. Here we go, she whispered. By this afternoon, I could be carrying your baby. 2 weeks later, the pregnancy test came back positive. Emma called me from her bathroom, crying happy tears into the phone. Madison, it worked. I'm pregnant with your baby. I sank onto my kitchen floor, overwhelmed by gratitude and disbelief. After months of devastation, hope was growing inside my sister's body. Our genetic material, Jake's and mine, finally becoming the child we'd dreamed of. I'm going to take such good care of this baby, Emma promised. I'm going to eat perfectly, exercise gently, avoid everything dangerous. This little one will have the best possible start. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt genuinely happy. Not just hopeful, but truly, deeply happy. Emma moved into our spare bedroom during her 2nd month of pregnancy. I want you to be involved in everything, she insisted, dragging her suitcase up our stairs. Every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, every weird craving. This is your pregnancy experience, Madison. I'm just the vessel. Having her close felt like a miracle. I could monitor her nutrition, ensure she was resting enough, accompany her to every medical checkup. The baby was developing perfectly, measuring exactly on schedule with a strong, steady heartbeat that brought tears to my eyes every time I heard it. Look at those tiny fingers, Jake marveled during the 12-week ultrasound, pointing at the grainy image on the monitor. That's our baby in there. Our baby. The words still felt surreal, but increasingly real. Emma's body was changing, expanding to accommodate our growing child. Her sacrifice became more visible every day, and my gratitude deepened proportionally. I threw myself into preparing financially for our baby's arrival. With Emma's medical expenses on top of regular bills, money was tighter than usual. I started working overtime, picking up extra projects, saying yes to every opportunity that could increase our savings. You're working too much, Jake worried as I left for the office at 7:30 on a Saturday morning. The baby isn't due for 6 months. Exactly why I need to work now, I replied, kissing him goodbye. Once the baby arrives, I want to take extended maternity leave. These extra hours now mean more time with our child later. Emma supported my strategy completely. Work as much as you can, she encouraged. I've got everything handled here. The baby and I are doing great. And they were. Emma followed every guideline religiously. Prenatal vitamins, regular exercise, balanced nutrition, adequate sleep. She documented everything in a pregnancy journal that she planned to give me as a keepsake. Your baby's first home was well cared for, she wrote in one entry I accidentally glimpsed. The thoughtfulness of that gesture brought tears to my eyes. By the 5th month, we'd settled into a comfortable routine. I worked long hours while Emma managed her pregnancy with meticulous care. Jake split his time between supporting both of us. Excited about becoming a father, but also grateful for Emma's sacrifice. I don't know how we'll ever thank your sister enough, he said one evening as we watched Emma reading pregnancy books on our couch. She's giving us everything. I agreed completely. Emma was giving us the most precious gift imaginable, our biological child. Nothing could ever diminish my appreciation for that generosity. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect, as it turned out. I came home early from work that Tuesday, excited to surprise Emma with the organic prenatal supplement her doctor had recommended. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Too quiet, but not empty. Voices drifted from the living room, low and serious. I should have announced myself, should have called out hello and given them time to shift whatever conversation was happening. Instead, I set down my bag silently and moved toward the voices, curious about who was visiting in the middle of a weekday afternoon. The living room doorway revealed a scene that rewrote my understanding of reality in a single glance. Jake sat on our couch, holding Emma's hand. Both of my parents flanked them, their expressions grave but supportive. Emma's other hand rested protectively over her rounded belly. Over my baby. The child needs to be with its real parents, Jake was saying, his voice calm and certain. This arrangement was always complicated, but now, he squeezed Emma's fingers. Now it's clear what's best for everyone. I gripped the doorframe, my knees threatening to buckle. They hadn't noticed me yet, too absorbed in their conversation to register my presence in my own home. Madison will understand eventually, my mother said, her tone gentle but firm. She's always been reasonable. Once she sees how happy Emma and Jake are together, she'll realize this is the right decision. The baby deserves a stable home with parents who are committed to each other, my father added. This isn't about hurting Madison. It's about doing what's best for the child. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. I never planned for this to happen, but I can't deny my feelings anymore. And the baby. She looked down at her belly, voice softening with maternal tenderness. The baby should stay with me. I'm carrying it. I feel connected to it in ways Madison never could. The connection between a mother and child is sacred, Jake agreed. Pregnancy creates bonds that no contract can override. It's natural selection, my father observed with the clinical detachment he'd always applied to uncomfortable situations. The right parents will raise this child. Biology has a way of correcting artificial arrangements. I stood frozen, watching my family discuss my replacement like I was already dead. They'd thought this through, planned it, made peace with their decision to betray me completely. The conversation continued, but I'd stopped processing words. My sister, my twin sister, my closest friend, the person I'd trusted most in the world, was stealing my husband and my baby, and my parents were helping her do it. I backed away slowly, grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter, and left through the back door. None of them noticed my absence until much later. The papers were ready 3 days later. Divorce documents that Jake presented with apologetic eyes and carefully rehearsed explanations about following his heart and doing right by the child. I signed them without argument, my hand steady despite the earthquake in my chest. Madison, I hope you understand this isn't about not caring for you, he said, watching me initial page after page. You're a wonderful woman, but Emma and I, what we have is meant to be. I didn't scream, didn't throw anything, didn't demand explanations for how my marriage had dissolved while I was working overtime to support our growing family. Instead, I nodded and kept signing. Each signature felt like closing a door on the life I'd thought was mine. Where will you go? Emma asked, her voice small with guilt but firm with resolve. She stood in our bedroom doorway, watching me pack my belongings into the same suitcases I'd used for our honeymoon 2 years earlier. I'll figure it out, I replied, folding my clothes with mechanical precision. Amazing how a life could fit into so little space when you stripped away everything that had never really belonged to you. My parents called that evening, their voices heavy with false concern. We know this is difficult, my mother said. But in time, you'll see this was the right decision. The baby will have a loving home with 2 parents who are committed to each other. Emma never planned for this to happen, my father added. Love isn't something you can control. Jake realized where his heart truly belonged. I listened politely, made appropriate sounds of understanding, assured them I harbored no resentment. They seemed relieved by my composure, interpreting my calmness as acceptance rather than the strategic control it actually was, because I wasn't devastated anymore. I was focused. The initial shock had crystallized into something harder and infinitely more dangerous. Clarity. Crystal clear understanding of exactly what had been taken from me and exactly what I could do about it. That night, alone in a cheap motel room, I spread the original surrogacy contracts across the scratchy bedspread. Every page, every clause, every legal safeguard our lawyer had insisted upon. Emma's signature bold and confident on documents establishing that she had no parental rights to the child she was carrying. My child. Created from my genetic material, carried by someone who had explicitly waived all maternal claims. The law was remarkably clear on this point, as I discovered during late-night internet research sessions that stretched until dawn. They thought they'd won, thought they'd stolen my life and my child while I was too weak to fight back. They'd underestimated the woman they'd created through their betrayal. I wasn't the same Madison who'd signed those divorce papers with quiet dignity. I was someone harder, someone smarter. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. Someone who understood that revenge served cold was infinitely more satisfying than revenge served hot. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Doctor's appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m., 20-week scan. We should know the gender. I deleted the message without responding, then opened a new browser tab to research the best family law attorneys in the state. The baby wasn't due for 4 more months. Plenty of time to prepare for the surprise they'd never see coming. They wanted to play family with my child? Fine. Let them get comfortable. Let them make plans, choose names, decorate a nursery. Let them believe they'd won completely and permanently. In 4 months, they'd learn that some battles aren't over when you think you've won them. They'd learn that legal documents matter more than feelings. And they'd learn exactly what happens when you betray someone with nothing left to lose. The real game was just beginning. You know what they say about rock bottom? It gives you a solid foundation to build on. And let me tell you, I was doing some serious construction work on my new life while my dear sister was busy playing house with my husband and my genetic material. Funny how that works out. The efficiency apartment I rented was about the size of their walk-in closet, but it was mine. No shared decisions about furniture placement, no compromising on wall colors, no pretending to like Jake's sports memorabilia cluttering every surface. Just me, a pull-out sofa bed, and a kitchen table that doubled as my legal research headquarters. Because that's what I was doing with my newfound free time, becoming an expert in reproductive law. While Emma was probably picking out nursery themes and Jake was practicing his devoted father routine, I was memorizing statutes, case precedents, and the fine print that would determine who exactly was having a baby in 4 months. The original contract sat spread across my tiny table like tarot cards predicting the future. Our lawyer had been thorough, almost obsessively so. Every possible scenario addressed, every loophole closed, every contingency planned for. Well, every contingency except the one where my husband fell in love with my sister while she carried our child. Even the best lawyers have limited imagination, I suppose. Gestational carrier agrees she has no claim to parental rights. I read aloud to my empty apartment, my voice dripping with satisfaction. Genetic parents retain full legal custody regardless of circumstances. The words were beautiful in their simplicity. Black and white. Unambiguous. Enforceable. Emma's signature stared back at me from the bottom of page 12. Bold, confident, completely legally binding. She'd signed away any claim to my baby with flourish, probably feeling so generous and selfless. The irony was delicious. I spent 3 weeks researching family law attorneys, reading reviews, checking success rates, analyzing their approach to complex cases. This wasn't a situation for someone's cousin who handled divorces and DUIs. I needed a specialist, someone who understood that biological relationships and legal relationships weren't always the same thing. Margaret Chen came highly recommended by online legal forums. 30 years of experience in reproductive law, a track record of wins in complicated surrogacy cases, and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when clients' rights were violated. Her consultation fee was steep, but worth every penny for what I was planning. These contracts are ironclad, she confirmed during our first meeting, reviewing the documents with professional appreciation. Whoever drafted this anticipated every possible complication. Your sister has no legal standing to claim this child, even though she's carrying it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Margaret smiled, the kind of smile that probably terrified opposing counsel. Especially because she's carrying it. Gestational surrogacy law is very clear. The genetic parents are the legal parents. Your sister is providing a service, nothing more. A service. I liked that terminology. Clinical, accurate, appropriately cold for someone who'd stolen my husband while pregnant with my baby. However, Margaret continued, we need to be strategic about timing. If we move too early, they could potentially argue duress or coercion. If we wait too long, they might establish some kind of emotional possession claim, though it wouldn't hold up legally. What do you recommend? I asked, though I suspected I knew. We wait until the birth. Then we execute immediately, before they can establish any kind of physical custody arrangement. The hospital will be required to release the infant to the documented legal guardians. You and your ex-husband. Ex-husband. The term still stung, but it was accurate. Jake had made his choice. Soon he'd learn that choices have consequences. And some consequences last 18 years with monthly payment reminders. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be a ghost in your own life? That's exactly what the next few months felt like, watching from the shadows while other people lived in the story I'd written for myself. But here's the thing about being invisible. You see everything, and people forget to guard their secrets around someone they think doesn't matter anymore. My health insurance, thankfully, hadn't caught up with my changed marital status. Jake's company plan still listed me as a beneficiary, which meant I had access to every medical record. every appointment, every detail of my baby's development. The irony was perfect. He was paying for me to monitor the pregnancy he'd stolen from me. 24 weeks measuring perfectly. I read from the latest ultrasound report, downloaded directly from the patient portal. Estimated due date, March 15th. I marked the date in my calendar with a red pen. March 15th would be the day my new life officially began. Margaret had been busy establishing our legal groundwork, emergency custody orders prepared in advance, hospital notifications filed with the legal department, documentation proving my continued financial responsibility for all medical expenses, everything ready to execute at a moment's notice. Your sister and ex-husband have no idea what's coming, Margaret observed during one of our weekly strategy sessions. They seem to believe that possession equals ownership. It's a common misconception that works in our favor. Through mutual friends and social media stalking, don't judge me, desperate times call for desperate measures, I kept tabs on their happy little domestic scene. Emma posting pregnancy photos with captions about unexpected blessings and love finding a way. Jake commenting with heart emojis and promises to be the best father possible. My parents sharing everything with proud grandparent enthusiasm. The whole performance was nauseating, but also incredibly useful. Every social media post, every public declaration of their intentions, every documented statement about their future as a family, all of it would become evidence of their deliberate attempt to steal my child. Keep screenshots of everything, Margaret advised. Social media posts, text messages, any communication that shows their intent to permanently separate you from your biological child. It strengthens our case for emotional distress damages. Emotional distress damages. I like the sound of that almost as much as I like the sound of monthly child support payments. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding myself in ways that had nothing to do with legal strategy. The job I'd neglected during my marriage demanded my attention again, and I threw myself into work with renewed focus. Turns out, when you're not spending emotional energy on a cheating husband and a manipulative sister, you have remarkable professional clarity. My boss noticed the change immediately. Madison, your project management has been exceptional lately. Whatever you're doing differently, keep it up. What I was doing differently was channeling my rage into productivity. Every spreadsheet was perfect. Every deadline met early. Every client interaction flawless. Anger, properly directed, was incredibly motivating. 30 weeks, I noted, checking the latest medical update. Emma was experiencing some back pain and swelling, typical third trimester discomforts that I should have been helping her through. Instead, I was analyzing her symptoms for any complications that might affect delivery timing. March was approaching faster than they realized, and unlike my dear sister and ex-husband, I was ready. You ever notice how people get sloppy when they think they've won? It's fascinating from an anthropological perspective, the way victory makes people careless, overconfident, absolutely convinced that their success is permanent. Emma and Jake were about to become a case study in premature celebration. 36 weeks, I announced to my bathroom mirror, reading the latest medical report like a countdown to Christmas. Baby could arrive any time now. The formal tone couldn't hide my excitement. After months of careful planning, we were entering the final phase. Margaret's team had been meticulously preparing our legal arsenal. Emergency custody orders signed by a judge who'd reviewed our case with professional disgust at Emma and Jake's behavior. Hospital notifications ensuring medical staff would be legally obligated to respect documented parental rights. Even security protocols in case my former family tried to interfere with the transfer. Transfer, such a clinical word for taking back what was always mine. The medical records showed that Emma had chosen Riverside General Hospital for delivery, a detail I'd noted with particular satisfaction. Riverside was where I'd been born, where my grandmother had died, where I'd volunteered during college. The staff knew me, respected me, and would follow legal documentation to the letter. Everything's ready, Margaret confirmed during our final preparation meeting. Judge Morrison has signed the emergency custody order. Hospital administration has been notified. Your ex-husband will be served with paternity and support papers immediately following the birth. Support papers. Jake was about to discover that being a biological father came with financial responsibilities that lasted considerably longer than romantic feelings. The child support calculations had been particularly satisfying to review. Based on his current salary, he'd be paying me approximately $1,800 monthly for the next 18 years. What about Emma? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She has no legal standing whatsoever, Margaret replied with professional satisfaction. The contracts she signed are comprehensive. She voluntarily relinquished all parental rights. Any attempt to claim custody will be dismissed immediately. I'd been tracking Emma's social media posts with anthropological fascination, nursery photos featuring a crib they'd never use, baby clothes organized in drawers that would remain empty, registry lists for items that would never see their intended home. The dedication to this elaborate fantasy was almost admirable. Jake's posts were equally delusional. Photos of himself assembling a changing table, captions about preparing for fatherhood, comments from friends congratulating him on his impending family with Emma. Did he honestly believe that sleeping with my sister somehow transferred legal custody of our child? The male ego truly knows no bounds. My parents had thrown Emma a baby shower last weekend, an event I learned about through carefully monitored social media updates. Photos showed a room full of people celebrating the arrival of a baby that would never live in that house. Never call Emma mommy, never become part of their revised family narrative. The guest list had been interesting. Extended family members who'd presumably been told some sanitized version of events. Family friends who thought they were celebrating a happy ending rather than a spectacular beginning of consequences. Even Jake's parents, apparently buying into whatever story they'd been told about this magical new arrangement. March 12th, I noted, seeing Emma's latest hospital pre-registration update. 3 days ahead of schedule, but within the normal range for delivery. Margaret's team was on standby, ready to execute our plan the moment I received notification that labor had begun. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably Emma using a new contact since I'd blocked her months ago. Labor starting. Going to hospital now. Thought you should know. How thoughtful of her. How considerate to keep me informed about the delivery of my own child. I screenshot the message for our legal file, then called Margaret. "It's time," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "They're heading to the hospital now. We'll be there in 20 minutes, Margaret replied. "Are you ready for this?" Ready? I'd been ready since the day they betrayed me. This was just the culmination of months of careful planning, legal preparation, and strategic patience. "More than ready," I said, grabbing my keys and the folder containing every document that would transform this day from their triumph into their worst nightmare. The real show was about to begin. Picture this. You're expecting the happiest day of your life, surrounded by people you love, about to welcome a baby you believe is yours. Now imagine a knock on the door that completely destroys that fantasy in under 60 seconds. That's exactly what happened to my dear sister and ex-husband on what should have been their perfect family moment. I arrived at Riverside General 30 minutes after receiving Emma's text, just as labor was transitioning into active phase. Perfect timing, dramatic enough to be memorable, but not so late that I'd missed the main event. Margaret and her associate followed in a separate car, briefcases full of legal documentation that would rewrite everyone's understanding of this situation. The maternity ward felt surreal. Fluorescent lighting, that peculiar hospital smell of disinfectant and anticipation, the distant sounds of new life beginning. I checked in at the nurse's station with documents establishing my legal right to be present for my child's birth. "Mrs. Madison Taylor?" the nurse confirmed, reviewing my paperwork. "Yes, we have you listed as the primary guardian, room 314, where my baby was about to be born, and where several people were about to have the worst surprise of their lives." I could hear voices through the door. Emma's exhausted breathing, Jake's nervous encouragement, my mother's excited commentary about becoming a grandmother. They sounded so happy, so prepared, so completely unaware that their entire narrative was about to collapse. I knocked gently and entered without waiting for permission. After all, it was my child being born in there. The scene was exactly what I'd imagined. Emma in the hospital bed, hair matted with sweat, gripping Jake's hand during contractions. My parents flanking the bed like proud guardians. Jake's parents sitting nearby with video cameras ready to document their grandchild's arrival. Everyone froze when they saw me. Not the good kind of freeze, like when you surprise someone with a birthday party. The bad kind, like when you realize the person you thought was dead is standing in your living room holding a legal document. "Madison," Emma gasped between contractions. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for the birth of my child," I replied calmly, setting my purse down and pulling out a chair like I belonged there. Because I did belong there, more than anyone else in that room. "Your child?" Jake's voice cracked with disbelief. "Madison, we discussed this months ago. The baby needs to be with its legal parents," I interrupted smoothly. "Which would be you and me, according to every document we signed." I held up the custody papers. Funny how legal contracts work. They remain valid even when people's feelings change. The room erupted in overlapping voices. My mother demanding explanations, Jake's parents asking what was happening, Emma crying about how this couldn't be legal. It was chaos, which made Margaret's entrance even more perfectly timed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret announced, her voice cutting through the noise with professional authority. "I'm Margaret Chen. representing Mrs. Taylor in this matter. I have emergency custody orders and hospital directives that need to be reviewed immediately. She handed documents to the attending nurse, who read them with growing understanding. Legal paperwork has a way of clarifying situations that emotion tends to complicate. These appear to be in order, the nurse said finally. Mrs. Taylor is documented as the legal mother with full custody rights. This is insane, my father sputtered. Emma has been carrying this baby for 9 months. She has no rights whatsoever, Margaret interrupted coldly. Ms. Emma Taylor voluntarily relinquished all parental claims in a legally binding agreement. She is a gestational carrier, nothing more. Emma's next contraction seemed stronger, more urgent. The monitor showed the baby's heart rate accelerating. Our child was ready to join this spectacularly dysfunctional family drama. Push, the doctor instructed, apparently deciding that legal complications could be sorted out after the medical emergency was resolved. And then, at 11:43 p.m. on March 12th, my daughter was born. Perfect, healthy, absolutely beautiful, and legally mine from the moment she took her first breath. They placed her on Emma's chest initially, following standard protocol. But when the nurse asked who would be taking the baby home, Margaret stepped forward with our documentation. The infant will be released to Mrs. Madison Taylor, the documented legal guardian. The moment they placed my daughter in my arms, everything else became background noise. Emma's sobbing, Jake's protests, my parents' threats to call their lawyer. None of it mattered. My baby was finally where she belonged, with her real mother. What do you think happens when someone tries to steal your life and discovers that legal documents are stronger than emotional manipulation? You get a front row seat to the most spectacular meltdown in family history. That's what. And let me tell you, it was better than any reality TV show ever produced. The hospital became ground zero for what I can only describe as the complete implosion of my former family's elaborate fantasy. Security was called when my parents refused to accept that they couldn't override legal custody with grandparental outrage. Jake alternated between begging me to be reasonable and threatening to fight the documentation in court. Emma was the worst of all. Watching her realize that carrying my baby for 9 months hadn't actually made her its mother was simultaneously heartbreaking and deeply satisfying. She kept reaching for my daughter with this desperate, possessive need that revealed exactly how far she'd fallen into her own deception. You can't just take her, Emma sobbed as the nurses prepared my discharge paperwork. I carried her. I felt her move. I'm her mother in every way that matters. Except legally, Margaret replied with professional detachment, which is the only way that actually matters. The beauty of legal documentation is its complete indifference to feelings. My daughter belonged to me because I was her genetic mother, and Emma had voluntarily waived all claims. No amount of emotional testimony could change that fundamental reality. Jake's response was particularly entertaining. He seemed to believe that being the biological father entitled him to some kind of decision-making authority about custody arrangements. His shock when he received paternity papers along with child support calculations was almost comical. $1,800 a month? He sputtered, reviewing the financial obligations that came with his parental rights. For 18 years? Congratulations, I said sweetly, adjusting my daughter's blanket. Being a father is expensive. You should have considered that before you decided to become one. My parents tried everything from guilt trips to legal threats. They called their family lawyer, who promptly informed them that surrogacy contracts were ironclad and my rights were unassailable. They threatened to sue for grandparental visitation, until Margaret explained that grandparents have no legal standing when parents refuse access. You can't cut us off from our granddaughter, my mother pleaded during one particularly dramatic confrontation. We've done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong except conspire to steal my child, support my husband's betrayal, and attempt to permanently separate me from my own baby. But sure, nothing wrong at all. Emma's legal attempts were equally futile. She hired an attorney who specialized in emotional custody cases. Apparently, there are lawyers who will take any case if the retainer check clears. Her argument centered on the bond she'd formed during pregnancy, and her belief that carrying a baby creates maternal rights that transcend contracts. The judge who reviewed her petition was less than impressed. Ms. Taylor, he said with barely concealed irritation, you voluntarily entered a gestational carrier agreement. You explicitly waived parental rights. The child's genetic parents never relinquished their legal standing. Your petition has no basis in law. Case dismissed. Next, Jake's child support obligations became legally enforced 3 weeks after our daughter's birth. $1,800 monthly, plus half of all medical expenses, educational costs, and childcare fees. His romantic gesture of leaving me for my sister was turning into the most expensive midlife crisis in recorded history. The most satisfying part was watching their elaborate plans crumble in real time. The nursery they'd prepared sat empty. The baby clothes they'd purchased would never be worn by the child they'd intended. The family name they'd chosen was irrelevant because I'd already filed birth certificate documentation with the name I'd selected months earlier. Emma moved back in with our parents after the hospital discharged her. Without a baby to care for, without Jake's full-time companionship, without the fantasy family she'd constructed in her mind, she seemed lost and smaller somehow. The confident woman who'd stolen my life had been replaced by someone who looked confused about how she'd ended up with nothing. "I never thought you'd actually take her," Emma admitted during one final confrontation at our parents' house. "I thought you'd see how happy we were and realize this was better for everyone. Better for everyone." The narcissism was breathtaking. She genuinely believed that her happiness with my husband and my child was more important than my rights as the actual mother. The entitlement was almost impressive in its completeness. "You thought wrong," I replied, my daughter sleeping peacefully in her carrier beside me. "About pretty much everything. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation or elaborate schemes. Sometimes it's simply taking back what was always yours and walking away from people who never deserved you in the first place." That's exactly what I did. And let me tell you, the view from the other side of betrayal is absolutely spectacular. I moved to Portland 6 weeks after my daughter was born. New city, new life, new beginning. Everything they'd tried to steal from me, rebuilt on my own terms. The apartment I chose had 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, and large windows that filled the space with natural light. Most importantly, it was 800 miles away from my former family and their ongoing dramatics. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below and make sure you're subscribed for more stories like this one. Emma tried calling for weeks after I left. Voice messages that started angry, progressed through bargaining, and eventually devolved into desperate pleading. I listened to each one exactly once before deleting it. Her emotions were no longer my responsibility to manage. Jake's calls focused primarily on negotiating child support payments. Apparently, $1,800 monthly was straining his budget, especially since Emma wasn't contributing financially to their household anymore. The romantic fantasy of leaving your wife for her sister becomes considerably less appealing when it comes with 18 years of mandatory payments to the woman you betrayed. "This isn't sustainable, Madison," he argued during one particularly pathetic conversation. "I can't afford this level of support and maintain my current lifestyle." "Then change your lifestyle," I suggested with mock sympathy. "Children are expensive. Perhaps you should have considered that before you decided to have one." The most entertaining development was watching their relationship deteriorate without a baby to bond over. Turns out, stealing someone's husband and having a baby with him aren't actually foundations for lasting love. Who could have predicted that betrayal might not be the basis for a healthy relationship? My parents made exactly 3 attempts to contact me after I moved. The first was angry, threats about how I'd regret cutting them off from their granddaughter. The second was manipulative, promises about how things could return to normal if I just brought the baby for visits. The third was practical, asking if I needed any financial assistance as a single mother. I responded to none of them. Their granddaughter would grow up knowing exactly who had chosen to support her mother's betrayal and who had stood by her when it mattered. That seemed like valuable information for her to have. The legal aftermath continued for months. Emma filed 2 more custody petitions, both dismissed immediately. Jake attempted to modify his child support obligations 3 times, unsuccessfully each time. My parents consulted 4 different attorneys about grandparental rights, learning repeatedly that they had none when the custodial parent refused access. Meanwhile, I was building the life I'd always wanted. My daughter was healthy, happy, and developing beautifully. My career flourished as I channeled my energy into work that actually mattered. I made new friends who knew nothing about my previous life's complications. 6 months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Emma and Jake had broken up. Apparently, the stress of legal battles, financial obligations, and the complete collapse of their perfect family fantasy had destroyed whatever connection they'd thought they shared. Emma moved back in with our parents permanently. Jake was dating someone new, someone without a complicated family situation or expensive monthly reminders of his past mistakes. The irony was perfect. They'd destroyed my marriage and stolen my pregnancy experience to be together, only to discover that relationships built on betrayal rarely survive their own success. As for me, I was living proof that sometimes the best response to betrayal is patience, documentation, and the kind of cold, calculated revenge that comes wrapped in legal paperwork. They'd tried to steal my life and ended up destroying their own in the process. My daughter's first word was "mama," spoken while sitting in her high chair in our sunny Portland kitchen. Not the kitchen Emma had imagined, Not the family Jake had planned, not the granddaughter my parents thought they deserved access to. Just my daughter and me, building a life that belonged entirely to us. They'd thought they could rewrite my story, assign me the role of the discarded sister who gracefully accepted her replacement. Instead, I'd written the ending myself. Their biggest dream had become their worst nightmare, exactly as planned. And my dream? My dream was sitting in my arms every night as I rocked her to sleep, legally and permanently mine, in the life I'd built from the ashes of their betrayal. Justice, it turns out, is best served with a side of legal documentation and a generous helping of patience. The victory was worth every moment of the wait. If this story resonated with you, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Sometimes the best endings are the ones you write yourself, even when other people try to tear up your first draft. Trust me on this one.